Hi, I'm Valentin Haack, experience designer at BCG Digital Ventures, and you're watching A Student's Perspective.
Hi, I'm Paige Bechtle, and this is A Student's Perspective. Today I'm speaking with Valentin Haack, experienced designer at BCG Digital Ventures. And I'm really excited about this conversation to get started today. It's a different outlet for what we're used to outside of the interior architecture realm, but still getting into some of the design aspects we're so used to talking about and discussing. So if you like this conversation, please like, share, and comment. And thank you, Valentin, for being here with us today. It's exciting to see that someone has, been aware of our podcast too, even before we were able to reach out to you. And so some of the interactions that we were able to have to make these connections is super exciting. We love connecting with people, not only outside of our major. So I'm within the interior architecture program at Marywood University in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which seems like this middle of town nowhere in the United States. But my fellow faculty also went to SCAD. And so I think those connections are just so great to continue to achieve. But I'd like to start by just asking a little bit about your background in school. So SCAD, how did you first come to even venturing back there? Because you're obviously out of the States now. So how did that even begin and where did that start?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I want to start a bit in the past. When I went to a high school, my life was basically balanced between obviously some friends and family, but also a lot of sports and art and design. So that was my passion, and I knew that I wanted to continue playing those sports while studying post high school. So I decided to look into schools to the US because they offer great programs combining with athletics. So that was like the main reason. And in high school, I had high level classes around art and design, but to be honest, it didn't offer everything you can imagine. And in the past, I was aware of architecture, graphic design, advertising, because my dad is doing that job. So all those kind of creative fields. But after I submitted my application and everything worked out with SCAD, and I've actually flew over after I graduated from high school. I actually saw what is out there and how much you can actually do in the design field. So it was quite mind-blowing. I actually saw that there's much more than just graphic design, or in Germany, I'm from Germany, so automotive design is big there, which I didn't feel very passionate about initially, but then going into SCAD, I met a lot of people. Luckily, being part of the sports team helped me to connect with other people very quickly. And it was just being great to be around like-minded people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you start with actually, what was your major when you were studying at SCAD? And I know you said you realized that there was so much more to design than even just the typical graphic design. And we learn more by looking at some of the coursework and the faculty that you'll meet and their different backgrounds that allow you to see just how broad it is. What was it that actually kind of looped you in, and what were some of the classes like?
Yeah. So I remember when I got the catalog from SCAD posted home in Germany, and I saw all of those majors and minors and had literally no idea what they were. It's like so many different things, and you know, I looked at service design, I looked at industrial design, but also looked at the graphic design because I've done some internships before at some agencies where I was helping out, doing some work in Photoshop, Illustrator, helping with some of the campaigns. So that was fun, but it was also something that I didn't want to continue. So when I joined SCAD, I still had graphic design in my mind, but more on a like artsy side. Like I wanted to do something more like specific rather than client work in an agency. So that was my mind. But then, yeah, my friends and teammates actually introduced me to some other majors, including industrial design. And industrial design is a big major. A lot of students actually come to do industrial design at SCAD, and it's very broad, and you can go from that specific major to a lot of different kind of industries, which sounded really good to me. And I got into those classes, and the first year is very general. So I said, okay, I'm gonna, sign up for industrial design. That sounds good to me. But later on, I felt like it might be not something I want to continue throughout my career. I was quite fascinated into technology, into the digital experience, but also in general the experiences of services or how a human is experiencing any kind of things, right? Like there's only always emotions attached. There's always something that we can design along the way that influences this experience, right? So service design was then something that came across, and it was quite a small major, but it was great. It was I think the only undergrad that was offered at the time in the US as service design. So I'm quite lucky that we had that opportunity. And so I started taking service design classes, and I got really excited about it, thinking through what kind of components of that make service design. So they obviously so if you think about service design, we think about certain touch points a user is going through. So rather than designing an experience, you design those touch points and artifacts, right? So an example would be a supermarket. You start thinking about how does the user get to the supermarket? What do they need to get to the supermarket? How do they hear about the supermarket? And then when that main part is of that experience, which is the shopping experience, you start thinking about, okay, what is the first thing a user would want to buy, or how do we architect the supermarket in a way that it makes sense for the user to go through? And then you start thinking about how we place products, how we do the cashier. Like, is it a human-to-human experience? Is it a self-checkout? So they're all those touch points the user's experiencing throughout their journey. And that is something that fascinates me the most. There's a lot of things you can start thinking about, talking to people, but also collaborating with other designers and other people from different industries.
That's incredible. And we know how acclimated SCAD is too, and the fact that they offer so many different outlets, it puts you in an environment full of creatives too. And that's what it sounds like your experience is, working side by side with so many different variations of majors and people. And I think another great thing about this podcast too is that we love to exploit the things that people aren't aware of yet. And sometimes it's your career path, sometimes it's what happens later down the line. But even like you just said, stumbling across your major, service design is, I don't think that's on anyone's radar when they're going through high school. Like, that's what I want to be doing necessarily. But it's something you grow passionate about and you grow to learn and love. And it integrates kind of everything that you've already fallen in love with, like you've said, graphic design, talking about the user and social interaction. And it now seems so relevant to me because I honestly had never heard of service design also prior to this conversation. And experience design is something we talk about so closely in architecture, interior architecture. How can we provide for the user in a way that's experiential? But it's always like it's part of the process, but we don't explicitly talk about it as much as we should, I think. It's about the narration, but we don't ever say why we're designing these key points. And when you started to say that, I forget the word that you just said, touch points?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way of tactilely demonstrating each step in a part of that journey. So I just find that fascinating that you've reached to some of those conclusions.
Yeah.
So
and you find it in different fields of design, as you mentioned, in architecture, interior design. There's so many overlaps, which is super exciting in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I was just as confused coming into the career and field of college. Is interior architecture going to be what defines everything that I like to do? But it's offered me similar extensions like photography, graphic design, and working with similar components. But I'm curious now, just because you have been in the work field for several years, what's it like working side by side with those different types of people? So is BCG a place where you're constantly working with people of different interests and expertise?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly it. So when I joined BCG Digital Ventures, so we have, just to do clarification, there's BCG, the consultancy, and then there's BCG Digital Ventures, which is basically its own entity, but have a partnership with BCG. And this company is basically building startups. That's basically it. So it's very exciting, very fast-paced environment. And as you mentioned, a lot of different expertise coming into one room, which creates basically this startup team. So me coming in there as an experienced designer, I obviously was not working well, I was working with different people in the beginning, but mostly just with a design background. So when I joined them, I was suddenly working with people who were building business models, who were looking at the marketing side of things, who are thinking about the growth of the startup. But also, obviously, the people I then started to work with closely, the product managers and the engineers who are helping to bring this product or service to life. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey because I've learned so much in just a very short amount of time. So that was really exciting. And in that venture room, so we call them ventures because we usually partner up with some corporations to build out their startups. As a designer, you also have the opportunity to educate design in that venture room because some of those more business-oriented people, they do not understand sometimes the certain methodologies or perspectives we as designers have, because we take obviously the role as the user. Like we want to represent the user in that room. And for us, it's really important to make sure that the product works, that the user, there's product market fits, that the user is actually enjoying and using our service. And this is obviously important for our business people as well, but they're more focused about does it make money, how can we grow the business, and how can we make it sustainable. So that is really exciting, working closely with that part, which I haven't experienced in SCAD that much. So as a designer, you start then thinking of not only about all those amazing things you can do in terms of technology, but you also have to start balancing it out with what is feasible, how can that possibly make money while still being a useful product or service.
Yeah, it's always a double-edged sword working with people in business. But I just like you said, being able to learn and understand that process, it makes it so much easier and to understand how feasible things can be and just what's actually qualifying within the industry and what can work and what can be productive and what's really going to make your business excel when it comes down to it. We try to shove to the side money in some of the conversations of design school. And I think at least for the first few years too, you try to neglect it and square footage and things like that. Things you want to forget just to let your design and creativity ebb and flow in the ways that it should, but it's always going to be a part of the process, and we're growing into that as we grow and then get into the field and the design industry.
And that's exactly how it was at SCAD for me as well. Like, it was quite great because you didn't have any obligations. You just were trying to design something that is amazing, that obviously meets the user needs, but there were no rules or anything. So that was really exciting. But with the service design, however, we've got that lens of business strategy growth as well. So that was really helpful when I actually then joined Digital Ventures as a experience designer.
Yeah. So I even see a quote on BCG's website about industry-changing businesses, because obviously you work with people who are making an impact on a larger scale, and it's not going to be something that's either narrow-minded or it's so impactful and useful. And so what does that even begin to describe kind of your goals and mission when you're working for businesses with such strength and power?
Right. So usually how it works is we work together with big corporate clients. Usually they are in certain industries, possibly dominating that industry, but also want to reach out into different kind of sectors, or thinking about expanding one arm of their business into a different industry. So that's a case where they would come to us and they would want to possibly build something out on their own, but they need the help for it because big corporations are different managed than small startups. They don't know how to actually get this started, how to get a product on market and grow a business very quickly. So this is how the relationship is between our company and our corporate partners. So oftentimes what happens is, sometimes they have an idea in what area they want to go. Sometimes they don't have any ideas, and we come back to them with some proposals, saying, okay, here are some concepts we think that could be an opportunity for you to look into and possibly start something great. And thinking about the process of what we're going through when we work with those corporations is, usually we would divide it in 3 different phases. The first one is like an innovation slash validation. So this is around, usually I'd say 8 to 10 weeks or 12 weeks sometimes. This is really, really focused on this initial phase of research, discovery, finding out where there are opportunity spaces, talking to a lot of people in these industries, gathering information, and also coming up with ideas. So at this point, it's just really, very broad-minded. You don't exclude anything. You just write down your ideas, and then over time, you're trying to validate those, right? So you start to put a couple lenses on top of it. Is it feasible, viable, etc.? And is that something that our corporate client would be interested in? Yeah.
I was very just interested in the design process, like the way that you discuss it, because it's kind of similar, but there's so many different variations. Like, whereas our design process, in terms of concept, schematic design, and then completion design, like getting to that construction phase for us, is almost similar to reaching those final presentations.
Yeah, exactly. So thinking about this first phase as the beginning of this design process. So you start first, ideating about this, gathering those ideas, and then you start concepting that, right? You start making some of the designs, visualizing some of this, possibly mapping out and journey maps to kind of visualize and how that could work. And then in the end of that phase, imagine like a Shark Tank kind of style. So we bring in our corporate partner, and oftentimes we pitch them 2 to 4 concepts, Sometimes we also have collaboration sessions with them together to kind of define those. But we really then at this point have like a prototype, so a digital prototype of what that product could look like or the service. We have an understanding of the business model and like what the roadmap could look like. So kind of pitching those back to the corporate partner, and then getting their feedback in terms of, okay, do we want to go forward with some of those? Do they make sense for us? And then there's a decision made. And then depending on how that decision is made, we'll go to the next phase, which is then actually building it for real, which is very exciting as well. And then, yeah, and then it starts basically not totally from the beginning, but you have that one concept and you start looking at research again. You're doing ethnographic research just to inform that service even more, and you want to identify some of the problem areas, opportunity areas, and start building very quickly a working prototype or like a working product. Because all what we want to do is we want to get this out very fast to gather insights from our users, right? So we can learn very quickly. So that is like one of the most important things in the beginning of that second phase. So oftentimes design as from a process perspective, it's hard because you have to sometimes neglect some of the things you actually want to implement. But at this point, it's more functional rather than fleshing out the full design of that product.
About some of the changes, like, and talk about the product design or even getting to that phase of things. And now with COVID, I think this is so relevant for you guys. How has that changed the way that you design for users? Because I imagine, and I think just from seeing portfolio work, etc., like how interface friendly things have become in terms of graphics, and now offering things in your fingertips, like maybe on a social media platform, versus all these tactile things that we were once used to. How has that kind of adjustment been?
So I think our corporate partners they actually identified that, a lot of things are moving now digital, and a lot of things can be done remote. So I think a lot of them have seen that as an opportunity, which we can help with. I guess what changed for us is we had to move from talking to our users in person or seeing how they use the app or the website or the service in real life to remote. So that was quite a big change for us designers, because we like going out there, talking to people, seeing how they use certain things, and all the stuff. So that was like one of the biggest changes, I would say. But there are still tools out there which allows us to work with them remotely, and so far has been working out well.
Yeah. And so going back to even some of I'm curious in the process of the programs you utilize too, and I know what you do explicitly might be a range of things, or there not always be heads down into a computer, but what are some of the things that you interact with on a daily basis?
Right. A lot of Post-it notes. Yeah. So especially in the beginning, but even throughout, like designers at our company like Post-it notes. So we have in our office actually a lot of walls where we can use to ideate, post-it stuff on it, and a lot of like affinity mapping, like writing out our ideas, clustering those to come up with new features, or just writing down our ideas. And otherwise, in terms of softwares, so there's Miro, which we use to collaborate. So it's like a platform that lets us, it's basically like a digital version of Post-it notes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And then in terms of design software for our products, we use Figma. So I'm using that on a daily basis. It's basically a program like Sketch, which lets you design the screens and map out user journeys, etc. And it's fun, but also well, no, it is really fun because you collaborate. It's like Google Docs, but design software, so you can see what other people are designing. Oftentimes, people are getting a bit anxious about it because like showing your stuff sometimes when it's not done, or it's always a bit weird if someone looking over your shoulder and sees what you're doing at the moment. Um, but yeah, we got used to it, and you can kind of work out your own spaces, and that's fine.
That has been a big change with COVID too. So our presentations even shifted from, and we're used to pinning up and printing and plotting paper that are 36 by 48, 56. But now we've shifted to online murals. So we do like a mural platform in which we're pinning up technically on this like software in which everyone's presentations are up. And now it's a similar thing. There's anxieties over people like, oh no, you can see my work 12 hours too early. And it's like extended some more honesty and truth too, which I think is really nice. It's like pushing collaboration, I think, a little bit further than it ever used to, but it's just
I agree.
big
Yeah,
changes.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. We have a big feedback culture, and I think it's just helpful for all of us, especially I think in the design world, especially it's always difficult because there are some people it's hard to take feedback or give feedback because everyone is quite protective of what they're making, which makes sense. Like we put a lot of effort in it. We love what we're doing, so oftentimes it's just really difficult. But yeah, through that remote working, I think it actually yeah, maybe even helped.
Yeah. And so you started the conversation with talking about post-it notes and like even narrative mapping or just brainstorming and thinking tactily. So actually in a conversation with people or things you can visually see. Is that what your office culture is kind of like? And are you still back in the office now, even with some of these COVID changes?
So we just open up for the first time after a long time here in London. So it's only if minimal capacity, but I was actually able to go back in. It's really quiet, but I just needed a change of scenery.
Yeah.
Um, and it's quite like think about our office as a beehive almost. Like it's like an office where a lot of startups are popping up, right? So our teams work together for a long time. So up to if you think about those three phases, all of that together could go up to a year. So we have our own spaces, our venture rooms and breakout rooms. So it's basically our team environment, which is amazing because we can start, putting our own things on the walls. We can have our own desk, or I mean, there's no desk policy, but it's really a really nice environment, and we create our own culture, and it really feels like a startup team. So that's the most fun part of it, and it's really sad sometimes if you come towards an end of this project, and yeah, you might get on another one with different people, which is also exciting, but it's just like leaving or letting your baby go to the real world. Yeah.
That's the same way we talk about it. Your baby, your project's always your baby after you work
Yeah.
on it
Yeah.
long, tirelessly, sleepless nights, things like that. And so, BCG, they've spread kind of worldwide, country to country too. What are your plans like, or maybe not necessarily your plans, but what has it been like traveling? And now you are in London now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so leaving either Germany, or do you have plans to ever come to the States again? Or what has that been like to change your design experience? Like, do you ever consider the possibilities of working elsewhere, or what that design environment would be like with different creatives?
Yeah. So that was like a big decision for me, especially after college. I was in the States and I really enjoyed it. And I definitely wanted to take that opportunity to explore how it is to work in the US because I've done a couple of internships in Germany. So I wanted to take the opportunity to work, yeah, in the States. So lucky enough, it worked out in Los Angeles, um, where I started. And unfortunately, after a bit over a year, I had to, yeah, move to London. It's not unfortunate, but unfortunate because I didn't get my visa. Um, so it was like, but yeah, they were very flexible around where I could go to. So usually they try to accommodate your preferences. So we have in the Sydney office, and a Berlin office, a London office, now even in Singapore.
Yeah.
So like there were obviously some thoughts as well going to Sydney, for example, also very far away.
Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of design, I yeah, I mean it's in LA at least there were basically designers from 2 or 3 different schools out of the States. So it's quite interesting to see what they have been learning and also what kind of methodologies they are bringing into the company. Um, and yeah, and the same with London, but I would say London is even more diverse. So a lot of designers come from different backgrounds. There are some architects, or some come from more, a fashion background, and that's really fun as well. So it's really great to have the opportunity to work in 2 different locations.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing. So we offer a study abroad program at our school too. We kind of think it's the most profound way to experience anything by working with other individuals. And we go to Florence. That's where we're normally based for 4 months throughout our college. And it's just, you meet so many different people, and that allowance just makes us want to go further. It's like, then we just want to push outside of the States, but it's always nice to come across people from different backgrounds. So it's just nice to hear how that's changed and kind of developed your career as well.
Yeah.
Now you even considered staying in the United States for a little bit longer too.
Yeah, exactly.
Things are a little crazy now, but
Yeah. No. But I mean, one day maybe I would go back. I really enjoyed the West Coast. Like still part of my heart is there, and maybe I'll come back one day. But again, there are so many other different countries and cities and cultures which sound really exciting. So yeah, I'm not sure what's going to be next.
I'm curious because of service design in general, and you had said SCAD was the first that offered that as a major too. And we have the discussion all the time that sometimes interior architecture, it's really well known in Europe, or at least recognized. But when we start to say it here, Marywood was one of the first to offer a bachelor's in this degree, and now I'm getting my master's in interior architecture, whereas it used to mainly be a fine arts degree. And so, like, starting that conversation and getting people to recognize you at that level, there's so much opportunity sometimes in different countries that allow you to be recognized for what you are really trying to explain and actually narrate is part of your process and design process. So I wonder if that's similar for service design, or if it's starting to grow,
Totally.
West Coast or South, actually.
Yeah. So while I really enjoyed service design at school, it was quite a challenge for me to find the right place to actually continue that career, especially as an entry-level designer. So oftentimes in the US, it's not as maybe recognized as in Europe. And since I wanted to stay in the US for that time, I looked in different areas. And some of my friends started as a more strategic role of a designer at different companies, and that would lead up to possibly a service designer. So obviously, it's like, as I mentioned earlier, like service design is like a more holistic view of an experience, which covers a lot of different areas of a design. And you work and you kind of manage and you talk to a lot of different stakeholders, and so that is, I would say, at least in the US, more a senior role. So it was quite hard to find something initially for that specific role. However, I don't regret anything. I love what I'm doing, and this program gave me the chance to actually participate in a different way in that bench room with my team, because I do have that knowledge and that background. But yeah, going to London as like after I came to after I left the US, service design was definitely more a conversation than in the States. Yeah, so people knew about it. There's obviously the Royal College of Art in London, which has a service design master's. So people know about it. People have that background here as well, which not many people had in the US.
Well, now we're going to grow the conversation even further. Now, hopefully college students or high
Yeah,
school students in these states understand the possibilities out there, because there's majors like this that, I mean, this is so relevant to interior architecture too, and I just wish that we had service design almost at my university so that we could work hand in hand with people like who understand that same conceptual background. But
exactly. Yeah.
incredible. So as we're getting closer to the end of the interview, I think I want to end by just asking you if you have any advice for students, whether it be college students, maybe entering their careers. And like, I already appreciate your process of maybe finding that entry level position. And it's not always going to be what you expect, but there is an eventuality to it, and there is a fruition that will eventually come, depending on that state. But if there is anything at all, what would that kind of advice look like?
Yeah, good question. So just thinking about it, I think it's important to jump on opportunities. Even if it's not your dream job, you will work for a long time, and I think it's important to find something obviously that you like and you're enjoying. But I also think it is like to get that experience in maybe a different field, or a different kind of aspect of design, and possibly just take another journey to your dream job. Like there are a lot of possibilities out there, and I think we shouldn't be afraid to um, explore different journeys and just jump on that train and see where it goes.
Yeah. Take chances. That's what I
Yeah,
love hearing.
yeah,
It's the most reassuring thing for me at the start of my process, finishing my master's now, and there's a million opportunities, but I'm starting with one, and it's just exciting to see where the journey could end, though.
yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here for this conversation so much. We're excited to have, like, we keep expanding a student's perspective in terms of the people we come across, the people we meet, the majors, and you just fit the category so perfectly too. So we're really excited to share this conversation with future students.
Thank you, Paige. It was lovely to talk to you today, and hopefully we'll talk again.
Absolutely. And would you mind actually, before we sign off, telling the viewers where they could possibly reach you, or even BCG, or whatever you find relevant, website or not?
Yeah, sure. You can obviously find me on LinkedIn if you want to get in touch with me. If you want to learn more about BCG Digital Ventures, just go on the website. It's bcgdv.com, and you can find out more about what I'm doing.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for tuning in for another episode of A Student's Perspective. And you can tune in next week as the conversation continues.